Hey everyone, welcome back to the Weekly Awakening Podcast. This is your host, Cosmic Colleen, back with another weekly astrology update, episode 292. Welcome to Uranus in Gemini and Venus in Gemini energy and mutables. We welcome the excitement and the exciting times that are coming. I'm going to talk a little bit more on this podcast episode about Uranus and Gemini. I know I talked a lot about it last week, and if you missed it last week, I talked about how Uranus and Taurus showed up, how this is going to show up in Gemini, and I have a lot to talk about. And then we're also going to be talking about this Friday, May 1st. How we're already at May 1st. We have the full moon in Scorpio coming in at 2:23 p.m. East Coast time, with a square to Pluto coming in before the actual official full moon at 1:50 a.m. Thursday night. So we are talking about, we're going to be feeling it Thursday night. 1:50 a.m. on Friday, but we're going to be feeling it Thursday night, that sort of square, and we're talking about that. And then on Friday, the 2nd, Mercury ingresses into Taurus. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast, reaching out to me, supporting me. I don't get any money for this podcast. The reason why I do it is I love to help you guys help and understand your mind every week. All right. And it helps keep me on track, and it just fills up my spirit. So the best way you can help this podcast is to rate, review it, subscribe, comment, send it out to someone. And that is honestly how this has grown over the years, especially for my OG, my day ones. You guys know who you are. So I'm totally grateful. And every time someone's like, oh, I listen to your podcast, or I do this, it sends a jolt of, I guess, maybe dopamine, but also like a joy in my heart. It really does, because I put so much love into this, and just to hear that, I'm like, wow, thank you. Thank you. It's been a long journey, 5 years of a podcast. Most people don't even make it, I think, past like 3 months. So I want to talk about a great post I saw on Instagram at Rachel Lev Meadows, I think. Hopefully I say that right. So she made this great post on Instagram about artists born in the last time that Uranus was in the sign of Gemini. And I was like, this is a perfect description of Gemini energy, as well as Uranus there, the rebelliousness that we talked about. So here they are: David Bowie, Bob Marley, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, Jimi Hendrix, Cher, Neil Young, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin. I also thought it was interesting that Jim Morrison, who else? Bob Marley, right? Bob Marley's part of the 27 Club. Jimi Hendrix is, and Janis Joplin, the people who died by 27, right? All three of those. Pretty sure Bob Marley's included in that, but maybe not. You guys have to let me know. I cannot remember. I'm like, wait, did he actually die at like 40? But what she wrote. So this is her little ad lib about it, astrology. What they shared wasn't a style. It was a refusal to sound like no one else, to flatten themselves into something more palatable, more familiar, more easily consumed. They had something to say, and they said it in the only voice that was actually theirs. And that's the number one thing of Gemini energy, is authenticity. I talked on last week's episode, a big shift we're going to see is we went from in Taurus, where everyone was very uniformed and the same, to now entering a new generation again and bringing alive that individuality. And I'm excited about that. And so when I read this fantastic post where these artists are they make sense because they are rebellion artists to the max. Each one of them, this is just me talking now, each one of them represent being unique, telling people to F off if they try to control how they did their music. And it was like the more rebellious, the more different they did their music, the more people loved them. Cher, she was famously quoted saying, my mom said to me, sweetheart, you should settle down and marry a rich man. And I said, Mom, I am a rich man. And that's very Uranus and Gemini right there. I'm a huge Cher fan. I saw her in high school. I went to it was like her 500th farewell tour she kept doing in 2004. And my mom was a huge fan. And so I could sing every Cher song right now if you asked me to. So that quote as a kid was actually really powerful. When I was a teenager, I remember hearing that quote, and that's something that I strive for. I'm a very strong Mercury placement, and Mercury placements are very independent when they go about life. So I love that. And I just think those artists were a really great description of this energy and how it happens. And I feel like at the end, with your right before Uranus ingressed into Gemini, we saw this sort of rebellion at Coachella with Justin Bieber, right? Like I think I love Justin Bieber, and I think that everybody expected him to show up to Coachella. Didn't he get fined or something? I saw it in this big performance, and he just sat there on stage with his laptop and YouTube and going through all of his songs and singing along. And that ended up, I mean, some people had comments, but that ended up like blowing him up again. People loved that. And it was like, hey, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. And like, I'm going to do whatever the F I want. So that energy is going to be really celebrated in a big way with Uranus in the sign of Gemini. So that's, again, there's a lot of cool energy. There's a lot of cool energy with Uranus and Gemini. And again, just look at the artists I named. Think about the things that are going to be really cool. And there's going to be a lot of seeking out good energy. Mutable signs, that is my Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Pisces. The beginning of this transit is going to bring a little fun and excitement, which will bring a nice breath of fresh air after 3 years of Saturn in Pisces. I want to talk to my mutable signs a little bit now and part of this new chapter as we move forward. I love that we're beginning this transit with a conjunction to Venus. I feel like that's a very good sign and omen for Uranus and Gemini. If you listened to last week's episode, you heard me say that personally, not collectively, this is going to be much better than Uranus and Taurus. And maybe collectively, because these last 8 years brought so many battles and stubbornness. Nobody wanted to hear what the other one didn't want to hear. Uranus and Gemini is going to be much more forgiving, much more understanding than it ever was in the sign of Taurus. Taurus, they like to, they come up with thinking about something and you can't change their mind, and they don't want to change their mind. Mutable placements like Gemini, they might argue aside, but they're always open to changing their mind. In fact, they're sort of like, please change my mind. And one day their mind changes and they don't even know how that happens. So those are, again, two different forms. And yes, Geminis, they love to argue, but it's an art form to them. It usually is because they feel, they do have all the right answers and they see things in a way that no one else sees them except for their Geminis and Virgos. That's how they view that, especially a Mercury ruled sign. But when I say we, I mean me. But Geminis will also be opening, like I said, to changing their mind on any subject, any opinion. And if given the right facts, they certainly, they want the facts, and they'll certainly, change their minds. And again, some days they wake up and that energy is like, I changed my mind today. I don't even know what happened. I don't know what came alive in my subconscious and came to my consciousness, but I'm just changing my mood. So the energy, like I said, is going to be really depending on the moment. And it's going to be very true to where Mercury is. So it's going to be lots of different mindsets. I feel like we're going to look back at and be like, what the fuck just happened? Like 8 years from now, we're going to look back and it's going to go one way, and then it's going to go another way, then it's going one way, and then it's going to go another way. But for my mutable placements, you're going to be feeling more upbeat, seeking enjoyment, feeling excited or giddy for no reason, wanting to feel a rush or excitement, feeling a little more rebellious, or this is who the fuck I am energy. I don't give a fuck what you think, which is a natural way that Geminis already think. And so just sort of like going back to those artists born with Uranus and Gemini, we see that that was a whole generation of music that just did whatever they wanted, and they didn't care. They didn't care if they came on stage and were so drunk and high, like people were still going to love their music and party with it. So it was just a totally different energy. This is also going to bring, though, for my mutable placements, a little frazzled energy, chaos, feeling like you're running around with a squirrel who lost its tail, kind of like going. There's a lot of mental processing happening, and Geminis naturally show up mentally, and like thinking, especially Geminis and Virgos, thinking is what you do best. Thinking is what you know. It is what you love. As well as the other two air signs, Aquarius and Libra, but now it's going to feel a little bit more, thinking is so natural to you that you don't even need to think, and you're thinking, if that makes sense. But now it's just going to require more effort and a lot of moving pieces that are really having you focus in and really purposely even change the way you're thinking pretty quickly. That might come as a surprise. So along with excitement, I'm going to say scattered, frazzled, erratic, eccentric. Nothing can hold you down, even if it should be holding you down, which is very Uranus. Nothing can hold Uranus down, even if it should, because it brings a high energy with rebellion. Now, we have it in a mutable sign of Gemini that's also very naturally themselves and rebellious by nature. Think about where it was previously in that fixed earth sign. So I just want to do one more description, then we'll move past this. High energy rebellion planet, Uranus, in the fixed sign, right? That's very hard. And especially in the fixed air sign, is like, no, think about that as a collective, not budging. Now, that seems much harder than an immutable air sign, don't you think? When we think about it in Gemini and the looseness and the changing, I was looking at Uranus, and not to make it like a scary planet, but it can be like almost like it's like the crazy criminal. Like I put a description as Uranus and Gemini as like, think of the Joker and the Joker's face. And then I was thinking about, because there is this anti-hero with Uranus. And then when I was thinking about Uranus and Taurus, I saw the face of Sarah Michelle Gellar in Cruel Intentions. Remember her, the stepsister? We all love to hate her. Isn't that very like Uranus and Taurus, and the Joker, Uranus and Gemini? Tell me you don't see that and feel that energy. And that's how this also can show up, because there is this darker side to Uranus, this very electric, this very rebellion. And both of those were two rebellious people in two different ways, but it's going to be a little bit how that energy is going to be. I feel like most of my listeners are millennials or older, so I know y'all know the Cruel Intentions that I'm talking about. There were some real hits in the 90s. Oh my God, I loved Cruel Intentions. I really did. The Mercury placement in me thought it was the coolest thing ever. So Uranus does not have, like I said, it has a darker, trickier side. So remember that. And ultimately, it's just that the trickery energy turns out to be our own mind and our own trickery. Remember, everything we see outwards is a projection from inside our mind. It is. So, and we can shift that. Once we understand that, then we can shift the energy around us. Then we can shift things. When we shift our thoughts towards something, that thing changes. Remember that, okay? I have said it more eloquently. I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop right there. Why can I not talk today? Sometimes for the better. To help us break out of stuck paradigms, okay? Our brain is said to be working subconsciously 95 to 99% daily. That's day in and day out of the same paradigm over and over and over again. We were programmed a lot to fear from a young child. Yes, some things are good, healthy fears. It's survival fears. But unfortunately, the way our brain works and the way, basically our brain works, it ends up bleeding through all the other ways into our personality. So we think it's this one thing, fear, don't take candy from a stranger. But in today's world, with 24-hour media feeding us horrible things that are happening all over the world, even tiny little things that are horrible, feeding us, it's bled to every crevice. So now people are walking around with so much fear. And that fear is keeping us stuck subconsciously in a paradigm that some of us might think that we cannot move past. So our brain, it hates fear, but it loves it as well because it wants to predict it. It wants to protect us from it. It wants to keep us safe. It's like kind of our brain has like almost an abusive relationship back and forth, right? Our brains with like the negative and the positive, and it's always going. And really it comes down to these fears in our brain always trying to keep us safe. So when we need something to suddenly wake us up and shock us, to break us out of the paradigm. That's how we get out. So, and some people don't let it happen, right? But you're going to let it happen. Some people say, nope, this horrible, shocking thing happened, so I'm going to go even further inwards. But some people say, you know what? I'm so shocked out of my paradigm right now. My nervous system's already fried. I might as well just allow myself to jump head forward into this new beginning. So Uranus and Gemini is here to break us out of our paradigms, especially, those really strong mentally held paradigms. And I think my fixed placements are really going to be feeling that more now that like Uranus has left that sign, left the sign of Taurus. Now you're like left with whatever had opened up during this time. You can't hide or you can't run from it. So we're breaking out, baby. And sometimes that breakout is slow and steady. And I feel like that's what I'm saying for my fixed placements when it was in the sign of Taurus. It was slow and steady. And now finally you're seeing it as it's ended. Where Uranus in Gemini is going to break out much faster, suddenly, impulsively, less predictable, with results that go back and forth, as opposed to the sudden ending with the fixed placements. That was very black and white, concrete endings, but with Uranus and Taurus. But Uranus and Gemini is going to be back and forth. Actually, I believe this, now I believe that. For mutable placements, there's a lot of energy around moving from thing to thing to thing. A lot of things are requiring a lot of mental energy. Okay, enough for that now. That's what I'm talking about. Now, this Friday, May 1st, we have the full moon in Scorpio, which will have a square to Pluto, but is the first full moon in Scorpio in 8 years that doesn't have a square to Uranus. I love that for this full moon, and it feels less dramatic because this full moon energy isn't going to come on suddenly or out of nowhere issues. Is going to bring out current issues or issues that were already predicted or less shocking now that Uranus is not in the picture. So I'm happy about that. You're not going to be thrown for any curveballs. You may have some intense energy, but again, it's not going to be new. It's very predictable energy or something you've already experienced. There's a lack of resistance for fixed placements with past issues that seem like it wasn't shifting or is not shifting. Once stuck is no longer stuck. Now you should be moving through it, emotionally grounded and less erratic with your emotions. But what did I say earlier? Take on the new paradigm. Don't run, don't hide, don't say, let me go back to something normal and comfortable. Allow yourself this new paradigm and things will shift for you. I feel like this full moon is going to really bring things to a head, but again, it's something that's already reached a head before that couldn't quite pop. And so these are things that didn't pop the end of this Uranus and Gemini transit are now going to pop now. So things come to a head now, but in a way of closure, sort of like, okay, this issue pattern, etc., keeps coming up. So it's time to find a common denominator without resistance and move beyond it. With Pluto, with the square to Pluto, we look to the exchange of power. So there's a power friction that is showing up for the mutable placements, but in the way of empowerment. This is a time where things are going to shift in the direction you want because you now have a better idea of how you can control and manipulate the power inside of you. This is a power bump, babies, with no real surprises, okay? Don't be surprised in yourself. Lean into this. This full moon lets us gain, we want to gain some awareness. And it's going to be around standing your ground, my fixed placements. What does standing your ground look like? Where in your life do you need to just let go, free that stubborn energy built up because it is standing, because standing your ground, is it actually accomplishing what you think it is? Is it actually accomplishing much more? Yes, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. I try to tell my Taurus placement oftentimes, like, this is just hurting you. You standing your ground for this stubborn reason is literally only hurting you. It is not hurting the other person. Sometimes, you got to say, why am I being so stubborn about this? And where in your life do you need to stand your ground? Now, that's going to be for everyone else except for the fixed placements. Fixed placements, like I said earlier, hate having to change their mind. So when they come up with an opinion, they aren't changing it. And if they have to, it takes them a long time and they just don't like doing it. So you guys this for you guys is about learning how to let go, and maybe you don't always need to stand your ground on some things. Maybe you do need to compromise. Where everybody else, could be where in your life do you need to stand your ground a little bit more and be more assertive. And say, it's okay for me to get my way. Like, people who let everyone else get their way, you guys sometimes need to say, okay, it's okay for me to get my way. I deserve that. Let me tell you all now, we're done for the astrology. I'm going to end on this note. What the fuck happened to me last week, okay? If you guys have a queasy stomach and don't like to hear about, like, blood or guts, then turn it off now. So that's a fair warning. It involves gerbils, all right? So fair warning. Let me tell you, last week, with Mars and Saturn conjunct in my 8th house in Aries and Uranus moving into my 10th house of Gemini, basically interacting with all of my astrology, including a square to Mars right now, because I have a natal Mars in Pisces at 1 degree. So also rolling over my 8th house. In the 8th house, there's many things the 8th house rules over, but in this reference, death, the dark, the occult. So this week, I think it was Wednesday night, one of the days while we're still having this, especially Mars and Saturn conjunction, my son Remy, who just turned 10, he was in the shower. I was in my bedroom. My other son was in his room. He went into his room. He comes running in, and he's like, "Oh my God, the gerbil's eating the other gerbil." And I'm like, "Shut up," because he'll mess with his brother or joke or things like that to get his brother going. His brother jumps out of the shower, comes running. He's like, "What's wrong with my gerbil?" And Abram's like, "I swear to you, I'm not joking, Mom. I'm not joking." I go walking into the room, and sure enough, the fucking gerbil is eating the other gerbil's stomach out. And then I was like, "Oh my God." And then he's running around the cage with blood on his face like a sociopath. Now, this one was evil. This one had black eyes. I'm not kidding you, it bit Remy and never let go. Every day it tried to break out. It would bite. It was like really mean. The other one was much sweeter. So turns out gerbils are cannibals, though they're young sometimes. I never knew this or research. Sometimes they will eat their another one if one dies as a survival. And this one, though, my kids were like, "Mom, it was just alive 10 minutes ago." It just fucking killed it. So that was crazy. That happened. And then I'm sleeping, and my brother FaceTimes me, who never FaceTimes me. He lives in Los Angeles. And my stepsister, who I haven't seen her face in 6 years, is sitting with her. But I was like, okay, I'm laying in bed, but hello, this is a surprise out of nowhere. These are all, Uranus in the last degree of Taurus for me, moving into Gemini as well, with that conjunction to Venus, animals, stepsisters. Then the next morning I'm driving to work, and I am on Westchester Pike, where it's like a mini, I don't know how you describe this road, but, people are going 70 miles an hour. There is stoplights, but, going fast. And I'm like, and I'm one of those people driving that fast. And I was like, is that a person walking in the road right now, like towards me? So I swerved over, so did everyone else. And he was this guy who looked like he knew, like right before an alien invasion movie or something like really strange that M. Night Shyamalan would do. He like knew it was coming. And he was just staring up in the sky, walking around. That's crazy. And that's the second time I've had a story like this with a Uranus transit, like this very spacey out there. Then I got an ear infection that turned into vertigo, which never happened. I got stung by a bee. So that is what happened. I just wanted to share that and there was like a bunch of other stuff that happened, but I could not believe, I never saw it coming. That's Uranus. Like I never saw this happening. So you guys know I like to share how this shows up in my birth chart, but I kept it quick this time. I love you all. I'll be back next week. I hope everyone has a nice, powerful full moon in Scorpio. Again, no sudden surprises though this time. I love you all and goodbye.